Dad's perfect revenge. I was about to sign the biggest loan of my life when my phone rang. "Bradley," my neighbor Michelle said, her voice tight with panic. "Why is someone loading trucks from your store right now?" My pen stopped mid-signature on the expansion loan papers. The banker across from me looked annoyed at the interruption. I'd been sitting in First National Bank of Grand Island for 45 minutes, going through paperwork to add that lumber yard to Stevens Hardware and Supply. This was supposed to be the culmination of 35 years running our family business, the expansion my grandfather always dreamed of but never had the capital for. "What trucks?" I asked, standing up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "Moving trucks, big ones. They're carrying boxes and equipment out of your building. I'm watching them right now through my window. My name is Bradley Stevens, and I'm 58 years old. I spent 30 years as an insurance fraud investigator before taking over our family hardware store 6 years ago when my wife Amanda got sick. She died 2 years back from cancer, and that store has been my anchor ever since. My grandfather built Stevens Hardware during the Depression, when nobody had 2 nickels to rub together, but everybody needed to fix something. 3 generations of Stevens men had poured their lives into that business. That Tuesday morning in March, I thought the worst thing that could happen was getting turned down for a loan. I was dead wrong. "Did you schedule movers?" Michelle asked. I could hear her moving around, probably getting a better view from her kitchen window across the street. "Hell no," I said, grabbing my jacket. "I'll be right there." That's when I heard something that stopped me cold. Through the thin wall separating the loan offices, I heard a laugh I knew as well as my own voice. It was Emily, my 46-year-old sister. She was supposed to be in Omaha visiting her 12-year-old son, Keith. But that was definitely her voice coming from the next office over. And she was laughing like someone who just pulled off the perfect con job. I left those loan papers scattered on that desk and drove the 8 blocks to my store faster than I should have. The whole way my mind was racing. Emily had been acting strange lately, more interested in the business than usual, always asking about expansion plans, profit margins, insurance policies. I thought she was just being supportive after everything we'd been through with her messy divorce last year. By the time I got to the store, the trucks were gone. All that remained were tire tracks in the gravel parking lot. And that sick feeling you get when you know something's terribly wrong but can't quite put your finger on what. Michelle met me at the front door, her phone already out. "I got pictures," she said, pressing it into my hands. The truck, the license plate, the men carrying stuff out. I didn't know what else to do. I scrolled through her photos with hands that were starting to shake. Professional movers in uniforms marked Nebraska Premier Moving Services. They'd loaded at least 20 boxes, plus what looked like my computer and filing equipment. The same equipment that held 35 years of business records, customer lists, vendor contracts, and financial data. The police showed up within 30 minutes. Officers Rodriguez and Patel, both young enough to be my kids, took my statement with the kind of patient politeness you give to confused senior citizens. They dusted for fingerprints and found none. They examined the locks and found no signs of forced entry. Then they checked the security system I'd installed after Amanda passed. "Mr. Stevens," Officer Rodriguez said, frowning at her tablet, "according to Allied Security's records, your alarm system was disabled yesterday at 3:47 p.m. using the master code. The building was accessed again this morning at 9:22 a.m., also using the master code. Both entries show up as authorized." Authorized. That word hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't given my security code to anyone except Emily. Last year, when I had to go to the hospital for some diabetes complications, she'd offered to check on the store for me. I'd given her the code because she was my little sister, and I trusted her with my life. The officers suggested I change my security codes and inventory what was missing. They left with sympathetic smiles, but I could see what they were thinking. Family drama, probably just a misunderstanding. Maybe the sister borrowed some things without asking first. If I'd been anyone else, I might have bought that explanation. But I'd spent 30 years investigating insurance fraud, tracking down people who thought they were smarter than the system. I knew that crimes don't happen in isolation. They have patterns, motivations, and most importantly, they leave trails. After the cops left, I walked through my store like I was processing a crime scene. I wasn't looking for what was missing yet. I was looking for what was different, and 3 decades of fraud investigation had trained my eyes to catch details most people would miss. The office area had been disturbed. Nothing obvious, just small changes that only someone who'd worked in that space for 6 years would notice. My desk chair was angled wrong. The coffee mug I always kept in the same spot was 2 inches to the left. The dust pattern on my filing cabinet had finger streaks running through it. I opened that filing cabinet with growing dread. My instincts were screaming that whatever I found in there was going to change everything. Half the business documents were gone. The original articles of incorporation that established Stevens Hardware and Supply as a family business in 1943, gone. The partnership agreement I'd drawn up 10 years ago, giving Emily a 25% stake when she got married, gone. The commercial property deed, gone. The business insurance policy, gone. In their place was a single sheet of paper I'd never seen before. It was a new partnership agreement dated 3 months ago, transferring 60% ownership of Stevens Hardware and Supply to Emily Stevens Martinez. My signature was at the bottom, notarized by someone named Nicole Parker on February 15th. The document looked official, professional, completely legitimate, except I'd never signed it. I'd never heard of Nicole Parker, and on February 15th, I'd been at the VA hospital getting my annual diabetes checkup. Something Emily knew because she'd driven me there herself. My hands were shaking as I stared at that forged signature, but my mind was already shifting into investigator mode. 30 years of catching insurance cheats had taught me to think like the criminals. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment theft. This was planned, methodical, and executed by someone who knew my schedule, my business, and my vulnerabilities. That night, I did what I'd done for 3 decades in fraud cases. I followed the money. First, I logged into our business bank accounts online. What I found made my stomach drop. Over the past 3 months, someone had been writing checks to companies I'd never heard of. Nebraska Wholesale Supply for $15,000. Midwest Equipment Solutions for $8,000. Prairie State Services for $12,000. All signed with my electronic signature authorization, but processed through an email I didn't recognize. Emily.stevensbusiness@gmail.com. I called the bank's after-hours fraud line. The representative confirmed my worst suspicions. The electronic signature system had been set up using my social security number and driver's license information, but through Emily's email address. Someone had been systematically draining our business account for months. Next, I pulled up our commercial insurance records through the online portal. 3 claims had been filed in the past 2 months for stolen inventory, each one for $9,800, just under the $10,000 threshold that would trigger a detailed investigation. The insurance payouts, totaling nearly $30,000, had been direct deposited to an account at Citizens Bank, not our usual First National. By 2 a.m., I had pieced together the scope of what Emily and her husband Trevor were doing. The forged partnership agreement gave them legal cover to claim majority ownership. The fake vendor payments were draining our operating capital. The fraudulent insurance claims provided additional quick cash, and I was betting that Citizens Bank account led straight to their personal finances. But knowing it and proving it in court were 2 different things. The next morning, I made a call I'd hoped I'd never have to make. Ryan Foster had been the FBI's senior financial crimes investigator on a pension fraud case I'd worked as an expert witness 5 years earlier. We'd spent 6 months in conference rooms building the case that eventually sent 3 corporate executives to federal prison for 15 years. Ryan had retired from the bureau 2 years ago and started his own investigation firm. "Bradley," Ryan said when I finished explaining everything, "I've got to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. How certain are you that Emily's involved?" "Ryan, I've been investigating fraud since before you were born. Every piece of evidence points to someone with inside access, knowledge of my medical schedule, and legal authority to make business decisions. There's only one person who fits that profile." "I know this is hard," he said, "but elder financial abuse by family members is more common than people want to believe. The average victim loses over $120,000, and most cases are never reported because of family loyalty. You're doing the right thing by looking into this." We met at Ryan's office that afternoon. His plan was methodical and thorough, Exactly what I expected from someone who'd built his reputation taking down sophisticated white-collar criminals. First, he said, we're going to subpoena the records from that notary service. Nicole Parker will have to explain who actually showed up at her office to sign those documents. Second, we're going to trace every one of those fake vendor payments. I guarantee you those shell companies lead back to accounts Emily and Trevor control. Third, we're going to get the security footage from the bank when that electronic signature system was set up. How long will this take? I asked. 2 weeks to build a solid case. But, Bradley, I need you to promise me something. You cannot confront Emily until we have everything locked down. If she knows we're investigating, she'll have time to destroy evidence or create alibis. Can you act normal around her for 2 weeks? I thought about Emily's face the last time I'd seen her, asking casual questions about the store's insurance coverage. I thought about Trevor's sudden interest in my retirement plans. I thought about my grandfather working 16-hour days during the Depression to build something that would last for generations. I've been acting normal around suspects my whole career, I said. I can handle 2 more weeks, but those 2 weeks nearly killed me. Emily called twice to check on my health, asking about my diabetes medication and upcoming doctor's appointments. She stopped by the store once to help with inventory, spending an hour going through our remaining filing cabinets. Every conversation felt like swallowing broken glass, but I smiled and played the grateful older brother who appreciated her concern. Meanwhile, Ryan's team was building an airtight case. The notary, Nicole Parker, cracked within hours when confronted with evidence of document fraud. She admitted Emily had hired her. Emily had presented the fake documents, and Emily had signed my name while Nicole pretended. Not to notice the Harold Stevens on the ID was clearly a woman 20 years younger. The shell. Companies were registered to a law firm Trevor had used for his construction business. Nebraska Wholesale Supply existed only as a bank account. Midwest Equipment Solutions was registered to Emily's home address. Prairie State Services was completely fictitious. The banking records told the real story. That Citizens Bank account had received $65,000 over 3 months. The fake vendor payments plus the insurance fraud payouts. But the money hadn't stayed there long. Ryan's forensic accountant traced where every dollar went, and the picture that emerged was one of desperation and greed that made my stomach turn. $25,000 had gone to pay off Trevor's credit card debts from 3 different banks. Another $18,000 covered gambling losses at the Prairie Meadows Casino. Trevor had been betting on everything from college basketball to horse racing. $15,000 went toward the down payment on a new Escalade that was titled in Emily's name. The remaining $7,000 had been withdrawn as cash over several weeks, but the most damaging evidence came from Emily's own phone. Ryan's contacts in digital forensics had obtained her text messages through a court order. The messages between Emily and Trevor painted a clear picture of premeditation and callous disregard for our family legacy. Bradley's at his doctor appointment. Emily had texted on February 15th. "Notary is here." Getting the partnership papers signed now. Trevor's response. Perfect. "How much longer before we can sell the whole thing?" "Need to drain more cash first. He's too sharp to miss a sudden sale. Give me 6 months to clean out the accounts, then we list the property." Months. They weren't planning to just steal from the business. They were planning to sell our grandfather's store and pocket the entire $850,000 value. The worst message was from just 2 weeks ago. Bradley's getting suspicious about the insurance claims. Might need to speed up the timeline. Can we get him declared incompetent? His diabetes is getting worse. They weren't just stealing from me. They were planning to have me declared mentally unfit so they could take complete control of everything I'd worked my entire life to preserve. By the end of the second week, Ryan had built a federal case that would have made my old insurance company proud. Wire fraud for the electronic signature scheme, bank fraud for the fake vendor payments, insurance fraud for the phony claims, and elder abuse for the systematic targeting of someone they perceived as vulnerable. "We're ready," Ryan told me on a Friday afternoon, "but I want to give them one chance to hang themselves completely. Are you up for a little theater?" The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would invite Emily and Trevor to dinner at the store to discuss making Emily a bigger part of the business. Emily's greed would do the rest. She'd see it as the perfect opportunity to push for more control, not knowing we had agents positioned outside and recording equipment throughout the building. I called Emily that evening, putting every ounce of tired older brother into my voice. I've been thinking about what you said last week about helping more with the business. Could you and Trevor come to dinner Sunday night at the store? I want to discuss some changes. The excitement in her voice was unmistakable. Of course, Bradley. We'd love to. Should I bring anything? Just yourselves. I'm making Amanda's meatloaf recipe. We need to have a family talk about the future. Sunday came with the kind of bright Nebraska spring weather that made you believe in new beginnings. I spent the afternoon preparing Amanda's famous meatloaf using the recipe she perfected over 20 years of marriage. I set up a table in the office area right next to the filing cabinet they had robbed 3 weeks earlier. Every detail had to look natural and celebratory. Emily and Trevor arrived at 6 miles sharp. Emily was wearing a new outfit, probably cost more than most of my customers made in a week. Trevor had his arm around her like they were walking into their own celebration. Which I suppose they thought they were. Something smells incredible, Emily said, giving me a hug that felt like being embraced by a snake. You've outdone yourself. Trevor shook my hand with the firm grip of a man who thought he was about to close the biggest deal of his life. Thanks for doing this, Bradley. We really appreciate you including us in the business planning. We sat down to dinner, and I let them guide the conversation. Emily talked about how proud she was of our family legacy, how much the store meant to the community. Trevor shared some ideas about modernizing our customer base and expanding into online sales. They were setting up their pitch perfectly, and I played the grateful older brother who valued their input. Finally, over coffee and Amanda's apple pie, Emily reached across and put her hand on mine. Bradley, she said, her voice soft with practiced emotion. Trevor and I have been talking about your situation. Running this store is getting to be too much for you, especially with your health problems. The diabetes, the stress, all the paperwork and regulations. Trevor nodded solemnly. We were thinking maybe it's time to consider selling the business and splitting the proceeds. You could retire properly, maybe move to one of those nice senior communities. Enjoy your golden years without all this responsibility. I looked at Emily's hand on mine and remembered teaching her to ride a bike in the store's parking lot. I remembered her high school graduation, walking her down the aisle at her wedding, holding Keith when he was born. For 46 years, I'd been the big brother who protected her, guided her, sacrificed for her. Then I remembered that forged signature on the partnership agreement. Actually, I said, keeping my voice steady and calm, I've been thinking about the business quite a lot lately. In fact, I've been doing some pretty detailed research into our finances and legal structure. Emily's smile faltered slightly. Trevor's hand tightened around his coffee cup. Really? Emily said, trying to keep her voice light. What kind of research? I placed a manila folder on the table between us. Emily went pale. Trevor knocked over his water glass, sending liquid spreading across the table toward the folder. I didn't move to clean up the spill. I just watched them both. That folder contains copies of the fraudulent partnership agreement you filed with the county recorder, I said, using the same calm, methodical voice I'd perfected in 30 years of depositions and fraud interviews. It also contains bank records showing the $65,000 you've stolen through fake vendor payments and insurance fraud. The digital forensics report proving you set up electronic signature access using my credentials. And the text messages between you two planning to have me declared incompetent so you could sell our grandfather's store. Emily started crying. Whether from fear, shame, or just getting caught, I couldn't tell. Trevor looked like a trapped animal, his eyes darting toward the door. Please don't try to run, I said to him. There are FBI agents in the parking lot. This is a federal case now. Wire fraud, bank fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy. Ryan Foster sends his regards, by the way. Trevor's face went gray. He knew that name from his construction days. Everyone in the business knew about Ryan's reputation for taking down financial criminals. Bradley, Emily choked out through her tears. Please, you have to understand. We were desperate. Trevor's business failed. The divorce took everything I had. We were going to lose the house, lose everything. I was going to pay it all back, I swear. I looked at my little sister. This woman I'd helped raise after our parents died in that car crash when she was 14. I'd walked her down the aisle at her wedding. I'd been in the delivery room when Keith was born. For 32 years, I'd been the big brother who protected her, guided her, made sacrifices so she could have a better life. But sitting across from her now, I saw something that broke my heart more than all the stolen money combined. Emily hadn't just betrayed me. She'd convinced herself she was the victim. "You weren't trying to protect your family," I said quietly. "You were stealing from it." There's a difference. The next hour was controlled chaos. Ryan's team entered with federal agents. Emily and Trevor were read their rights, while I called Emily's ex-husband to come get Keith, who was supposed to stay with them that weekend. That 12-year-old boy would grow up knowing his mother was a criminal. That wound would never fully heal. Over the following weeks, the full scope of their operation became clear. This wasn't their first rodeo. Trevor had been running similar schemes across 3 states, targeting elderly business owners and vulnerable family members. Emily had been his inside person, using family relationships to gain trust and access to financial records. They'd already defrauded Trevor's uncle in Iowa out of $45,000 using fake medical emergency stories. They had plans to target my cousin Ruth in Kansas, who owned a successful bakery. The FBI found evidence of at least 6 other potential victims on Trevor's computer. The federal prosecutors offered Trevor a deal if he'd testify about his broader fraud network and help them recover assets for other victims. He took it faster than you'd take shelter in a tornado. Emily, confronted with mountains of evidence and her partner's testimony, pled guilty to avoid a trial that would have destroyed what was left of our family's reputation in Grand Island. Emily was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Trevor got 5. The forged partnership agreement was voided. The fraudulent loans were removed from our business credit. Ryan's contacts in banking helped me implement security measures that would prevent this kind of inside access in the future. We recovered about $28,000 of the stolen money through asset forfeiture, but most of it was gone forever. The Escalade was sold, Trevor's construction equipment was liquidated, and Emily's jewelry collection went to pay restitution. It wasn't enough to make me whole, but it was justice. Keith lives with his father now, which is the best outcome for everyone involved. I see him around town sometimes. He's growing into a good kid despite everything his mother put him through. I don't tell him the details about Emily's crimes. Someday he'll learn the truth himself. For now, I let him believe his parents made some bad choices and are paying the consequences. These days, I still run Stevens Hardware with help from a store manager I hired after my health took a hit from all the stress. The diabetes is manageable, but the betrayal aged me more than any disease could. The business is stable, profitable, and ready to pass on to the next generation, if there is one. I also found a new purpose I never expected. Last month, I spoke at the Nebraska Small Business Association conference about family financial fraud. The week before, I helped another hardware store owner in Lincoln catch his nephew stealing inventory. Turns out the skills my grandfather's store taught me, attention to detail, understanding people's motivations, protecting what matters, are exactly what other business owners need to survive these kinds of attacks. Michelle still keeps an eye on the store from across the street, and we've become closer friends through all this. She reminds me that my grandfather would be proud, not just that I saved the business, but that I'm using the experience to help others protect theirs. Sometimes I think about Emily in her prison cell, and I feel something I can't quite name. It's not satisfaction. It's not grief. It's something colder and more permanent, like a scar that's healed but never stops reminding you it's there. This whole experience taught me that family loyalty and family trust aren't the same thing. You can love someone completely while still protecting yourself from their worst impulses. And sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's destructive behavior, even when, especially when, that someone is family. Our grandfather's store isn't just surviving now. It's helping other families survive too, and maybe that's the legacy he would have wanted most. The skills that built your career don't disappear when you retire. They become the weapons that can save your life when everything you've worked for is under attack. Blood may be thicker than water, but it's not thicker than evidence. And sometimes, Protecting your family's legacy means protecting it from your own family.